In this video, we're going to go over the Yolanda and Yoko word problem that causes people so much difficulty. Now, let's start with what we know. We both know that Yolanda and Yoko run a 100-yard dash. Now, we know that Yolanda finished first and Yoko was 10 yards behind. Now, what's interesting about this problem is they don't tell you the time. And so because they don't tell you the time, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it easy on myself and just make up the time. The problem doesn't say what the time was, so it can't say that I'm wrong. And so if we say that this is 0 yards and this is 100 yards, we know that Yolanda made it there first and Yoko was 10 yards short. Now let's say that it took Yolanda 1 minute to run 100 yards. And the problem doesn't say that, but choosing 1 makes this pretty easy for us. So this problem revolves around the basic formula of distance equals rate times time. Now, the distance for the time is the same. It's 1 minute. But the distance and the rate is going to be different. For Yolanda, after 1 minute, she had traveled 100 yards. So we put in 100 in for distance. We don't know the rate, and we put 1 in for the time. Now, this is why we use 1, because what that tells us is our rate is also 100 yards per minute. So this is how fast Yolanda is running. Now we do the same thing for Yoko, except she only made it 90 yards. But still, she was 90 yards at 1 minute. So that means she is running at 90 yards a minute. So this is going to govern how fast Yolanda and Yoko are running for these two questions. So now it says, now they start again with Yolanda 10 yards behind the start. All right. So now we cover this up because now it's a completely different setup. Now we have 0, we have 100. Yoko starts at the finish line, but Yolanda starts 10 yards back. And so her position is actually negative 10 yards. And so the question is, who wins? Well, the person who wins is the person who's going to get to 100 in less time. So for Yoko, she has to run 100 yards, so that's our distance, and we know what her rate is. Her rate is 90 yards a minute, but the time we don't know. So to find the time, we divide by 90, and time equals, as an exact fraction, 100 over 90, but we're going to want to approximate that. So 100 divided by 90 is 1.1 repeating minutes. So now we have to ask, what about Yolanda? Now Yolanda has farther to go because she's 10 yards back. So for her to reach the finish line, it's going to take her 110 yards to get there. But she's running at a faster rate. She's running at 100 yards per minute. So the time for her is 110 divided by 100. And as an approximate decimal, that is, well, if we move the decimal point over 2 places, that's what dividing by 100 is. We have 1.1 minutes. So this is 1.11111 on forever. This is just 1.1. So Yolanda actually did it in less time. So that means Yolanda is the winner. But now the second question is, by how many yards? So what we have to ask is, all right, if Yolanda is at the finish line, Yoko isn't at the finish line. How far back is she at that time? So at the time Yolanda made it to the finish line, where is Yoko? So for Yoko, we say distance, this is what we don't know for her, equals rate 90 times time. The time is the moment at which Yolanda crosses the finish line. And that is 90 times 1.1 is 99 yards. So she is 1 yard behind. Now this answer would be the same had we chosen the different number for time, or in some cases some algebra teachers will want you to leave it in terms of some other letter, but either way the answer would still be the same for part A. It's still 1 yard behind. So now on to the second question. It asks, how far should Yolanda be behind the starting line for them to finish in a tie? Now they're still running at the same rates. Yoko is still running at 90 yards like we found before. Yolanda is still running at 100 yards. So now we know that Yolanda needs to start behind the line. So what we do is we say, all right, we want Yolanda and Yoko to hit the finish line, at the same time. So the first question that we have to answer is, well, when is Yoko going to cross the starting line? Because we know how much distance she has to cross. She has to cross 100 yards. And she does it in 90 yards per minute times time. So for time, then is 100 over 90, which we found up above in part A. That's 1.1 repeating minutes. That's how much time Yoko is going to take. Now, what we have to do is we have to figure out how far back should Yolanda be. We know what her time needs to be. Let me label this. This is Yoko, and this is Yolanda. We know Yolanda's speed, her rate. That's 100. And we now know the time, 1.1 repeating. What we don't know is the distance. That's what we're trying to find, because the distance says how far does she need to go to travel in that time. So if we multiply by 100, that would be 1.1 repeating yards. Now, this from here to here, 0 to 100, is 100 yards. So how much more than 100? She needs to be back 11.1 yards in order for her and Yoko to cross at the same time. Different distances, different rates, but for here, the times are the same. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, please type them in the comments below.